Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by CrowCast. My usual co-partners here with me tonight. Macca, how you going, Mac?
Yep, good, mate.
Good to hear. And Nikki, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Very good, very good. A disappointing weekend for the Crows, obviously. But before we get into that little dissection, let's round up the scores from the weekend, shall we? Interesting weekend results, and probably almost, apart from 8th spot, probably almost shaping the final series this far out, I reckon. Thursday night, we had Geelong getting over a disappointing Sydney. I really thought that they'd get up, but hard to pick Sydney at the moment, and they went down 71-59 over the Cats at the SCG.
Fourth time they've lost their home games. I thought they would win too, but the real problem with Sydney at the moment is they used to have a very powerful midfield, but Hanbury wouldn't get a kick from an electric shock at the moment, and the other bloke used to be captain. He's so insignificant I can't even think of his name now. And of course they lost Mitchell to Hawthorn, and they've barely got a decent midfield. Parker, yep. Kennedy, yes, but they only really got two blokes.
They also lost their midfield coach.
Yeah, interesting that. It's an interesting little discussion around the value or otherwise of assistant coaches and line coaches. But I agree, Macca, their midfield is just a shadow of what it was a couple of years ago, and whether that's age or, you know, Hanbury's carrying injuries and has done for the last couple of seasons. But Kieran Jack is quite disappointing.
That's a bloke, yeah. Yeah. I couldn't even remember his bloody name because he never gets a kick. Yeah,
quite disappointing, and I think the result is that there's too much asked of Parker and JPK.
And it's interesting, you're naming all of those players, not one of them's quick.
No, that's right. Well, and, you know, that's where you'd think that they'd make the most of their advantage at the SCG, because it's not a ground that you really need to be quick on. But as you rightly point out, they've struggled there this season. Anyway, Friday night we'll get to at the end, of course. On Saturday, Brisbane just showing what they might be like over the next couple of years. I know it was only Carlton, but they gave them a right old belting, 120-55 up there at the Gabba, and they're coming along nicely, Brisbane, under Fagan, I reckon.
Yes, I think he's doing a good job with them, because he really came from nowhere. And, I mean, they've only won the 3 games, but they have had a lot of competitive losses. On the other hand, Bolton, he's trotting out some party line at the moment. They've obviously given him to say, but what can you say about it? I think they're pathetic, Carlton. Absolutely pathetic.
Well, I just want to say thanks, Brisbane, for keeping Carlton down the bottom of the ladder. That helps our draft picks.
Well, there's no way that Carlton come off the bottom now. Only one win for the season with 7 rounds to go. It's impossible to see them getting off the bottom, and their percentage is terrible. And speaking of percentage, I always reckon percentage is a really good indicator of form. And Brisbane have by far the best percentage of a 16th ranked team I reckon I've ever seen, nearly 89%. Better than everyone up until 12th. So I reckon the signs are good for the Lions going forward. We had Port Adelaide.
I was just going to say that just kudos to you guys as well as me. We talked about them earlier in the year when they weren't winning games, but we said there's a really nice style going on, and they will start to string some wins together eventually.
Yeah. And it goes to show the value of an organised coach. Fagan has a pretty good game plan going. It suits their squad. They're obviously responding, and look out for the Lions over the next couple of years, I reckon. Port, I still don't reckon they were terribly convincing over St Kilda. It was a pretty average sort of a game. 86 points. Port to St Kilda 50 on Saturday afternoon.
I'll repeat my standard comment about Port Adelaide. I think they play with a lot of intensity and not a great deal of skill. I think of all the teams that are up there at the moment and battling for the top 4 spots, they are by far the most unskilled, in my opinion. They burn the ball a lot, and that's why they won't win it. They won't win a flag. But in terms of effort, they always give very, very good effort. And but because of that lack of skill, you end up a lot of their games are very, very scrambly and scratchy to watch.
And
I was playing my own game. Well, because I was playing my own game of football, so didn't see it.
Didn't see it. Yeah, well, I agree with you, Macca. I reckon Port are one of those teams that play on emotion. They're obviously playing for each other at the moment. They've got a bit of a sniff at top four, and they don't have a lot of competition. Sydney is sputtering along. Melbourne and Geelong and to a lesser degree, Hawthorn and North, and GWS going down to today helps Port's cause for a top four spot. And I guess, you've got to be in it to win it, but, as it stands at the moment, that looks like they'll sit in the top four, and it gives them every chance, I suppose. Speaking of disappointing, Fremantle were terribly disappointing against Melbourne, although they didn't lose by as much as what we did. 102 Melbourne to Fremantle 48 at TIO.
Very weak in Freo, of course. They didn't have their main ruckman, and they didn't have their star midfielder. So
the same as when they beat us.
What does that say for us?
Just leave that there.
There's actually a message in that comment, actually. Yeah, well, what else did you say? No more comment.
No. Nick?
What Macca said.
Right, okay.
No more comments.
Hawthorn just chugging along nicely versus the Western Bulldogs. The Bulldogs were in it for a while, and then Hawthorn just got on top, and Western Bulldogs couldn't go with them. In the end, 122 Hawthorn to Western Bulldogs 59, so a pretty decent margin there. What's that, 63 points in the end, over 10 goals, and sees Hawthorn back in the 8.
Yeah, they'll probably be close to the worst team in the 8 because they clean up on teams like the Bulldogs and ourselves, etc. But I can't see them possibly winning a flag.
No, but I think they're probably actually one of the better teams in that bottom half of the 8. Just in terms of who they've got in charge of them and the way they play quite well, even in spite of injuries and other things that are coming in. And that's something that everybody's kind of admired about Hawthorn.
Yeah, I reckon I'd back them against Geelong, Melbourne and Sydney, Macca. And a lot of it has got to do with, again, their organisation and their coach, and they've been playing the same sort of structure and the same game for quite some time, and it's embedded into their squad. And yeah, I don't think they're a threat for the flag, but I'd say that I'm with you, Nick. I think they're the best of the 5 to 8 sides at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're very correct what you just said too. By the way, they are we're very well coached, very well organised, and what you're seeing is the maximum that he can get out of them at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, you still wonder. In the past, Hawthorn have always been able to maintain their status just through topping up their list, and they haven't really turned it over yet. And they've got a couple of blokes that are just sort of coming towards the twilight, Burgoyne, and we saw obviously Rioli pull the pin as well, which was a bit of a surprise during the week. So at some stage they're going to have to play a few more youngsters, I think, and that might set them back for a year or two. But whilst they got Clarkson there, they're always a threat, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they will hit the shit in a couple of years' time for the very reason that you just said, that they've got quite a few very good players that are getting close to the end.
Mm. We had North Melbourne struggling to put the Gold Coast away today, 95 to 58 in the end. Another fairly average game, and Gold Coast would sit behind the ball a fair bit, which challenged North. But they're still hanging around North Melbourne. They're only out of the 8 by, about 3%, 2 and a bit percent. So, they're still in the hunt, I guess, and they've got the game's best forward at the moment, which helps.
Yeah, no, I chose to do a couple of jobs instead of watching it. It wasn't. I was just trying to watch, but it was like, nah, not worth the time.
V8 Supercars were on, so I was more interested in watching that. But the problem is, though, that yes, they've got Ben Brown and he's great. They need some more talent around him.
Yeah, well, they're not for want of trying. They're throwing money around left, right and centre, but they can't seem to land anyone. So I don't know what that says about the club, but they've certainly got a war chest if they can throw the amount of money around that's been whispered about De Goey and obviously last year at Kelly and Dusty Martin. So I don't know if they. I'd almost be inclined if I was North to take the hit and see if they can regenerate their list rather than looking to cap off with a couple of stars, because I don't think they're that close to you. No,
you're on the money. That's what they should be doing. But for their supporters' sake, trying to keep their supporters, and they're going the other way around. But I think you're right with
all 300 of their supporters. No.
Is that including pets?
Yeah, but
that's the problem with North Melbourne is they've got to keep winning in order to keep the very meager fan base. It's a very loyal fan base, but it's not big.
Nicky, you say that's small. They know them by first names.
But and that's their problem is they've got to keep winning. They've got to keep trying to be successful or competitive, because as soon as they start to drop off, those little hanger-ons just go away.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever met a North Melbourne supporter.
I did, because he actually used to umpire in the AFL and was from South Australia.
I know one, but he won't make it public.
Won't admit it. We had Essendon and Collingwood fighting out a pretty good game. The Bombers were in it for a long, long time, and Collingwood just get over the line in the end, 78-62. Say what you like about Essendon over the last 3 or 4 years, but they do play an exciting brand of football, and Collingwood did well to keep them to only 10 goals at the MCG, I thought.
I loved it. I thought it was a great game to watch.
Yeah, 16 points in the end, so it keeps Collingwood at number 2 on percentage.
But you are right. Essendon are always good value. The way they play, they always put some excitement into the game, and because they're very gun and run, and they take a lot of chances. And as you said, Collingwood did well to contain them and to overcome them.
I wouldn't be surprised if Essendon finish above us by the end of the season. And the final. Sorry, go on.
But it's just very, very interesting about Essendon, because at the start of the year, or even towards last year, you had people calling for Worsfold's head and saying the list is crap and he can't coach. Well, look at this year. Well,
what happened? I mean, we had at the beginning of the year the knives were out for Worsfold, and they got rid of Neild, and look what happened. It's a fact. They've played far more attacking, aggressive, and exciting football since Mark Neild got the flick.
You are right.
So, I don't know what that says. It could be coincidence. I don't like slamming blokes like that. But
they did play how they're kind of playing now against us at the start of the year, though, remember?
Yeah, well, they did, and then they kind of went into their shell, and quite bizarre. Anyway, and the last game was a good one as well. West Coast getting up 86-75 over the Giants over there in WA. In the end, keeps West Coast in the top 4, and GWS scratching and clawing their way, trying to get back into the 8. I reckon the GWS are probably by far the best team out of the 8, I reckon.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, they should be with that list.
Well, they've got a very, very good midfield, the top midfield. Lack a little bit up forward now, because they've got 2 key guys out, and of course in Cameron and Patton, and that really was what cost them the game today, because their midfield was well on top, although the last quarter by Natanui was freakish. Natanui's whole game today was really one for the ages, really, and he's taken 2 of the very great marks for the year, and one in particular could well be the mark of the year.
Yeah,
look, it was a thoroughly enjoyable game too.
Yep. Anyway, it leaves us pretty much out of contention, I reckon. And let's go straight to the Crows Tigers wrap, shall we? Because, again, this song is relevant.
Get ugly. Damn, that's ugly.
Yeah. It was ugly once again, and we probably were in it for far longer than we should have been. Richmond getting over us in the end with a 6-goal 3 last quarter. 15 goals, 13, 103 to Adelaide. 8 goals, 8, 56. A margin there of 47 points after we were, about 16 points down, I think, at three-quarter time. Initial thoughts, guys, what did you think?
Well, as I said to you off air, I did predict that we'd lose by 45 points. And, to me, the game went to script where we would be very competitive in the first quarter, that they would start to exert a little bit of authority in the second quarter, that they'd increase that in the third quarter, and that then they would run over us in the last quarter. And that's exactly what did happen. And I think it's hard for any side to beat Richmond at the MCG with the form they're in, with the squad they've got, and with the run they get. It's going to be very hard to beat, let alone us with our patched up side where we've got players coming back with interrupted seasons, etc. And we're still not really at full strength. And when you look at our forward line, I think there's the key to it all. When you look at, with Cameron, we've got no Cameron because we've lost him. And, there's...
No bets.
Well, yes, there's no bets, but we've got only really Jenkins, Lynch, and Taylor Walker, and they're all bigs. And there's no buzzing smalls around the place. And, I think Phoenix made the point that he thought Fogarty should be dropped to put a small in. And look, we were far, far too heavy up forward. And we just didn't have that ability to put pressure on them to clear the ball out of our area.
For me, it was we would get the ball. We were actually doing quite good on the turnovers, etc. But then there was just nothing presenting, and that's the problem with having those bigs who weren't presenting up. So for me, I can understand it from Fogarty because we've seen that he just doesn't have that tank yet. He doesn't do that as much as what we would like to do. But the one who bloody should have been presenting and doing a shitload more was Hampton. And you guys were defending, you guys were saying, oh, yeah, he did okay. I was ropeable on him last week and I wanted him dropped for this week. And you saw exactly on Friday night why I wanted him dropped. And he's out of here at the end of the year. He should not be on our list.
I don't think you could have predicted such an insipid performance by an AFL standard or an AFL listed player.
No.
Yeah, I could because I've been watching him in the SANFL. And Richmond, you need to apply defensive pressure, and that's one thing Hampton just does not do and is not interested in doing.
Wow.
Well, I can say that you were correct about that he didn't on Friday night, but I'm with Phoenix, but he normally does. I don't know what was...
No, he doesn't.
His statistics are always very good defensively, and even on the weekend he got some ridiculous number of pressure acts. I don't know how they measure that, but
yeah, well, that tells
you that
those statistics are just stupid.
Well, they're not indicative, that's for sure. But we'll get to individuals in a minute. Let's have a look at the head-to-heads and very interesting stats. Speaking of stats, because in many respects we kept up. From a statistical perspective, we had 394 disposals to 449, 221 kicks, 173 handballs, so not a bad ratio there. 96 marks to 93, 56 tackles to 61. I felt like our tackle count was a little bit low, and I felt, I don't know about you guys, but I felt like we were missing a lot of tackles. They were breaking a lot of tackles.
Yeah,
we were trying to tackle from too far out.
Oh, yeah, arm tackles. Nicky's right, arm tackles they were.
Yep, and that's when I think that's an effort indicator, if you ask me. That's half-hearted. Source, I thought, did all right, 50 to 32 hit-outs. The frees were reasonably consistent. We'll talk about the umpires in a minute because not that it had any real impact on the game from a end result, but I thought the umpiring was pretty average.
Yeah.
Look, our clearances were good. We had 40 clearances to 38, and that include 14 to 10 centre clearances and just -2 on stoppages. And yet, I felt like our clearance work was where we actually lost the game, simply because there was no system coming out of the clearance. So we'd sort of get a tap, we'd win the clearance, and then it was either a negative handball to the back of the pack and then a slam on the boot, or it was the guy sort of kicking around the body. There was never any system coming from our clearance work, and we didn't take advantage of that, of our ability to break even in that particular area of the game. And I think that's what made our tall forwards look so stupid, really, because the delivery into our forwards was just horrendous, and a lot of it was because we just weren't moving the ball cleanly and effectively out of stoppage.
Instead of taking it further back to create the space, we were doing that quick slam on the boot, which is exactly what Richmond want you to do, which is why Broad was mopping up, because he was always positioned in that spot in the hole. The quick kick could only ever go to that position. It's the way Richmond play. They happily let teams get the clearance because they then apply that secondary pressure to force a turnover.
I think Phoenix summed it up very well, actually. Although we won the clearances, they weren't clean clearances where a bloke would be breaking forward and looking to put it onto a chest. They were just blind kicks going forward and leaving the forwards there under the hammer. So it sort of runs into what you were saying too, Nicky, the same thing. But you just didn't have that bloke on the outside running past, something where a lot of teams do that, when they get a clearance that they then fire it out to somebody running past on the outside, and we don't have that. We just, as you said, bang it on our boot, and most of the time, because we're under a little bit of pressure, and there's nobody to give it to, so it becomes not the luck of the really it just suits the defender when the ball comes in like that.
I think something that you said there, Macca, hits the nail on the head as far as I'm concerned, a lack of run, because generally speaking, you're feeding back again. Generally speaking, when you do find yourselves slamming the ball onto the boot out of clearances or tight, congested situations, it's because you've got no outlet. And I think lack of run was indicative of the whole game. There was one goal that Richmond kicked, I reckon, in the third quarter, and it was from a stoppage on our half-forward line. And the ball broke away, and as the camera panned back as Richmond were transitioning through the middle of the ground, there was a 10-metre gap between each Richmond midfielder and their Crows opponent. There was no movement, no run whatsoever. And when we had the pill, there was no aggressive movement to make space. And when they had the pill, we were just unwilling to run.
I remember that one you're talking about. The ball sort of between our forward pocket and half-forward flank, and I think it went all the way down that.
Yep.
Yeah, and they got a goal out of it, off memory.
That's right.
We certainly didn't do anything like that. So
No.
it went very well. And, we don't have those quick runners, and we really do have to concentrate on getting midfielders with not only a lot of guts and effort to get the ball, but that really have speed.
I think there's an element of lack of desire there, Macca, to be honest with you. Let's polish off these stats. Sorry,
Nick. when you're chasing tail all game, that when you've got to then do the defensive run, it just feels twice as hard.
I think it was. It's been a consistent element of our game during the season, Nick. And yes, you're right. You once your motivation drops, you start thinking, it's someone else's job. But it's endemic in our team this year. Let's knock these stats off. Rebound 50s, 47 to 32. Probably indicative of the fact they had 67 inside 50s to 45, which, given the other statistics that we've gone through, just shows how much more effective they were with the ball, because they didn't blow us out of the park with disposals. They didn't blow us out of the park in terms of clearances, and yet they were able to deliver it into their forward lines 22 more times than us over the course of the game. Contested possessions were reasonably even, 166 Richmond, 151 Adelaide. Our disposal efficiency, surprisingly, was reasonable. I felt we turned it over a bit. We held our own with contested marks, 14 to 13, although marks inside 50 was horrendous, which probably feeds back to what I was saying previously. It just you'd look at the statistics here and you think, well, that sounds like a close game. The only other thing there's two other stats. Score involvements. Richmond had 113 to 69, which just showed how well they were linking up to get their scores and their ball inside 50. And also, again, tackles inside 50, and this leads back to young Mr. Hampton to some respect, because that's what he was picked for, defensive forward pressure. They had 13 tackles to our 5 inside 50. So, look, to me, those stats just tell me that we weren't moving the ball correctly, because we certainly had enough of it.
Well, you can't argue with that, because we never really had a lot of really good change of play. The other thing, though, which was very relevant too, and I think Tex has got to take a bit of a blow for this, the number of times that he had the ball, the chance to mark the ball as he was leading and couldn't hold the ball, I reckon there'd be at least half a dozen times, and that's very critical when you've got those opportunities like that, particularly with the kick that Tex has got on him, and it let us down several times.
Nick?
It's a bit hard when Tex is being double and triple teamed, and that was my problem with what was going on. As soon as you see that happening, right, Tex is the one he's leading and doing that, but you can see that he's been surrounded by Richmond players. So if he's been surrounded by 1 or 2 extra Richmond players, then where's our free player?
But Nicky,
why weren't they being involved? He
did have the hands in front, and he did have the opportunity to hold the ball, and he just didn't hold it.
Yeah, I agree that Walker's marking has been an issue. I think it's been an issue for the majority of his career, to be honest with you. I don't think he's ever been good above his head, Macca.
I agree.
But Nicky's point is really valid, and I think, it indicates what we were saying earlier about ball movement, because you shouldn't be kicking it to a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 situation. And, they were playing a couple behind the ball, which is what they tend to do. They pressure around the contest and force a quick kick and have someone sitting in front to take the scramble kick, and then off they go. But we picked a team to play exactly the same game style as we got thrashed on in the grand final, and the game panned out exactly the same. I just don't understand why we picked a team to try and play that game again, because we saw in the grand final it wasn't going to work. And not only that, it's not the kind of game that we played when we played them at Adelaide Oval.
You're 100% right about that.
Narrower ground and you can apply the pressure.
Yeah, but Nicky, that's not the point. You don't revert to a tall, slow team against one of the most manic teams in the competition, because we've already seen that doesn't work. We saw it in the grand final last year. That doesn't work. So I'd rather see us try to run the ball aggressively like we did against them in round 3 or 4 or whenever it was, when we beat them quite convincingly at Adelaide Oval, rather than play a game style that is just... There was never any chance that it was going to be effective against Richmond at the G.
But I think that's what it comes down to, is that type of game style works on the narrower ground of Adelaide Oval. We can try and do it on the MCG, but we fail at it. So that's actually a problem with our coaching staff going, okay, you've got a game style for here, it doesn't work there. There is where the grand final is played. It's got to work there.
Yeah, we've also missed it. This is not on the particular game, but and I don't know whether the government would ever allow it, or the council, or whoever is in charge of it. But when Adelaide Oval was redone, it really should have been built to the specs of the MCG. They haven't missed that in Perth, but we've got this narrow ground, which is you're partly right there, Nicky. I think that's got some effect on it. It's not the only effect on it.
No.
Also mixed up with what Phoenix was saying as well. So, but I would love us to have had a ground where it was identical to MCG. Then there is no argument then about does this affect your game, and is this one of the reasons why you didn't go as well as you should have? And common sense says you should have built it to the specs of where the finals are played.
I don't disagree with any of that, Macca, but I don't think the dimensions of the ground stop you from giving a second handball and running to create space. I think you're both of you are absolutely right. It does affect you tactically, I also would have preferred that they made. I mean, I think they did make it about 5 or 6 metres wider on that eastern side, but I wish they would have gone further. But we've seen us previously be reasonably successful at the MCG. It's only been in the last couple of years that the game plan seems to have fallen over, and a lot of it is at the coalface. I mean, we did exactly the same as what we did in the grand final last year. We didn't run. We blazed away out of congestion. Our forwards were triple teamed. I thought Josh Jenkins actually towed Alex Rance up.
Yeah, once again.
And I would have almost had Jenkins in our top 3 best players, and we'll get to the individuals in a minute. But the problem was that we didn't have any effective high half forwards. Taylor Walker was getting double teamed. Tom Lynch was cooked and shouldn't have even been selected. Now, why does Tom Lynch get selected if he cannot play physically a game of AFL football? Like, surely you can see that on the track.
Well, normally his first game back is actually good, and it's his second game that's shit.
I'm sorry, Nikki, but he was.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, no.
He was not right.
Yeah, very poor game.
I mean, I like Tommy, and I think when Tom's fit and firing, he really adds a dimension to our team, and he really does help with that transition football that we've been struggling so much with this season. And I think part of the reason why our ball movement is so terrible is because we've missed Tom. But I just think that the ability to gauge whether a bloke is ready to play a game of football is something that should be an intrinsic part of your skill set as a fitness coordinator, as a fitness department. And I don't understand how Tom Lynch was able to get on the ground when clearly he was at least 1, maybe 2 SANFL games short of a run.
Yeah, you're probably right. But, well, there's a lot I don't like about our coaching setup at the moment. There's a lot I don't like about our training setup at the moment. There's, if our club was serious, our board would be sitting at the end of the year and they would be making some changes.
Well, what the indication, Macca, is that won't happen. And the reason why I say that is because not only did we re-sign Tommy Lynch, which I can probably deal with, but we re-signed Richie Douglas, and I think that could have waited a while because, and we'll get into individuals now, but Douglas had another shocker. Anyway, let's get to some individual stats, shall we? Because, we had 3 blokes over 30 possessions, including our little spiritual gun, Rory Sloane, with 31. But Matty Crouch, I thought, was somewhere near back to his best, certainly in terms of getting the ball. Distribution is still a bit away, but he got it 38 times, 17 kicks, 21 handballs, 5 marks, 3 tackles, 10 clearances, 4 rebound 50s. He had 15 contested possessions, went at 68 disposal efficiency. Metres gained for someone who got that much of the ball was a little bit down, only 381. But I felt that Crouch was probably our best.
I thought he was our best. And, I think with the ease of which he reads the ball and gets it is an embarrassment to some of our other players who rarely touch it, because the guy just gives 100% effort, and he's prepared to take a blow and a knock to get the ball. And he takes some pretty hard knocks through the course of the game, Matty Crouch, but he just keeps going in hard and he earns the ball. And, I liked his game. Yeah, you would like to have got a little bit further distance, but then maybe there wasn't the opportunity to give it to anybody there.
Well, that's a good point, Macca. That's a good point.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of movement.
And he's never actually been the longest kick anyhow, so his metres games in terms of those possessions, that's a bit more on par for him.
Yeah.
I, like you guys, that was closer to back to how he was playing last year. We saw it in the last quarter last week, so it was nice to get that continuity. He's doing it against a pretty decent midfield. I think that kind of helps to elevate him a bit as well. I quite like Sauce's game as well, and I think that impacts a lot on how Crouch can then play.
Yep, no doubt, Nick. And Sauce did have a good game. Lairdy, 19 and 16 for 35, took 6 marks, 2 inside 50s, 8 rebound 50s, 7 contested possession, again went under 70%, but had good metres gained, 547, which was just about team high, I think. Yep, team high, 547 metres gained, but turned it over 11 times, and that's probably my knock on Rory's game this weekend, was the fact that he didn't look as assured by foot as he normally does.
No, he didn't, but he was a warrior. There's no doubt about it. He played like a warrior, and his last quarter, I just thought, Rory just kept fighting to the end and risking his body all the time, and I'm very, very sad that I think this guy's definitely going to leave us at the end of the year. And
Rory Laird.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking about Sloaney.
Oh, come on, mate.
No, Lairdy.
Lairdy.
Oh, sorry, I heard the Rory and went straight to Sloaney.
We've got 3 of them.
Well, I'm looking at him in all the stats, and he's number 2, you see. So.
No, Laird's number 2.
No, but in order, sorry. In order.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry, Lairdy, well, the desk, as they call him. I call him the human stump, but he's fantastic. He's a guy that... I don't know how the hell he takes those overhead marks into his height, but he's fantastic, and he just risks his body all the time as well. He really is one that does use the ball most of the time.
Yeah, well, that was my knock, I guess, Macca, that I felt like he was a little bit less assured than usual. It was, another great game from Rory, and what I love about Lairdy is that he reads the ball so well, reads the play really well, puts himself in excellent positions, but again, it might have been indicative of what was happening up the ground ahead of him, that he did burn it a little bit. We'll get to
just quickly on Lairdy and his turnovers, and it's something that we've all commented on, is whilst he is kind of good by foot, they're still high kicks.
Yep.
And they've always been that way. He doesn't do a nice little bullet pass. They're always up in the air, and you can't do that against Richmond.
Yep. Yeah. And we did that a bit, actually. We hung the ball up and allowed them to close space. I noticed that. Whether it's just a confidence thing or something, I'm not sure.
That's what Richmond do. They deliberately do that to get those high kicks.
Yeah, but I mean, just because that's what your opposition wants you to do doesn't mean you do it. And I feel like our disposal has dropped as our confidence levels have dropped. Anyway. Sloaney for you, Macca, 15 and 16 for 31, took 2 marks, 7 tackles, 11 clearances if you don't mind, 18 contested possessions, a little bit down on efficiency, 64.5. And interesting to note, and I'll highlight this again, but just about without exception, or probably Seed is the only exception, all our midfielders were under 70% disposal efficiency this week, which is interesting. Stoppage clearances. Yeah.
Well, I love Stoney's game in terms of effort, though. The amount he does risk his body all the time. He just goes in there without any thought about getting hurt, and he's definitely got to be going. Otherwise, he would have signed by now or given some indication that he was going to stay. And there's certainly nothing like that. And when you hear his answers, whether going or whether he's staying, you really just get the impression that he's going. And I don't feel the same way about him going as I did with Dangerfield. I was annoyed about that. And Sloaney's probably earned the right to go. But he is a warrior. And I just wonder what our side's going to be like without a warrior like him next year, when you've got blokes like Hampton who've got 2 possessions and and a bloke like him who's busted his guts to get and risk his body to get 31 possessions, So, No, a very good game by Rory. Knock on Rory, he doesn't always use it very well, but he just earns some very, very hard balls.
And they're actually tagging him a little bit, and that's interesting because the past 2 games he's actually been tagged a bit, and he hasn't gone into his shell like we've seen previously. So obviously, whilst he had the time off, he did some work on that. I quite liked his game. Again, for those pressure acts, that desperation, that's everything that we know that Rory can give, and pretty much you would know that any other team would love to have him in their side.
Yep, it's going to be nice to get 2 picks for him. The next lad,
1 and 2. so we can get Lukosius and Rankin?
Well, we can talk about that a little bit further later on if you like. Tommy Day, I know that everyone's up and about Stevenson, but my God, this lad's having a season. 8 and 20 for 28, took 8 marks, 4 tackles, 2 inside 50s, 11 contested possessions, went at 90% disposal efficiency if you don't mind, 7 1%ers, 12 intercept possessions. The kid's are going to be a star, just an absolute star. He's a rock at halfback.
He already is one.
Well, he is actually a statue to the one time that Nicky was right.
I've been right more times than that, and you've said so. So,
yeah, but I was probably drunk when I said it. But Nicky did predict a year before he came on the scene. She said he is going to be a gun, and I'll tell you what, Nicky, he is a gun. He's every bit as good as you. I thought you were just piffling on a bit, but
No, I can spot talent.
Even a broken clock's right twice a day.
Yes.
I told you Hampton was poo.
Yeah, well, there you go. Those are 2 times.
Anyhow, he was outstanding. I thought we Jason McKay's put a star up against his name, and he was a star. And I honestly feel he has deserved the right to be the rising star of the year, because when you go through his game after game after game, he's under pressure with the ball coming at him, and he's got to earn his ball. It's none of this business of being in.
He's not a second rotation midfielder or a small forward that can butt in, and he's under the gun, isn't he, Macca? He's an integral part of our defence. And
just the way he has felt like you just watch him play, and it's like you're watching a 100-game player. It's for me, he's not as tall, but he's the second coming of Talia. And that's what I could kind of see glimpses of in the SANFL, was he just had that composure. And I think he's so whilst as much as I love Tiles, and I actually think Tiles is the best fullback in the AFL, he's more proactive in terms of it's a beautiful complement of those two together.
Yeah, I thought he was excellent. If every player played with the same dedication that he did, we wouldn't get beat.
Bryce Gibbs, I thought, was just a bit of a nothing game, really. 16 and 9 for 25, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 3 inside 50s, 6 rebound 50s, so played a little bit behind the ball, only 7 contested possessions. Went at 56%. This is a guy that is supposed to be a classy footballer and classy by foot. 56% disposal efficiency, and he was the bloke that was responsible for bloody bombing it out of clearances every second time. And I just wonder whether that's a Carlton trait or something. I don't know, because it was always Gibbs that was kicking around the body or scrambling a kick forward, and he doesn't seem capable of looking for the give, and I know that there may not have been too many options, but I think it's a part of his game he really needs to work on.
Yeah, if you look back at when he used to play for Carlton, he played a different game, a different role than he's playing at the moment. If we'd had Brad Crouch playing, Gibbs would be he'd be able to play the role that he was intended to play, which is basically they fire the handball out to him out in the open, and he used to get I always used to see him as a receiver at Carlton, not earning the hard ball. And that once you go out in the open receiving the ball, you've got an opportunity. And he has got the skill to deliver the ball very well under those circumstances. He's now been thrust into the middle and really taking Brad Crouch's role. And that's not a role that he's as expert at as he is when he's a receiver on the outside. And I think that's being demonstrated by exactly what you're saying. Most of his disposals out in the middle of the ground are just jamming onto his boot blindly.
Do you reckon, Macca, that it's a little bit of light father, light son? Because Ross Gibbs was an absolutely beautiful kick at the football, and I just wonder whether he taught Bryce just to kick the damn thing, and it's just carried on throughout his career, because 9 handballs for a midfielder is certainly against trend, and he didn't use the ball. Anyway, one bloke I thought was probably didn't play 4 quarters, but I felt like it was his most consistent game for a while. Hugh Greenwood had 22 touches, 10 and 12, kicked a goal as well. 3 tackles, which is a bit down for him. 8 clearances though, 15 contested possessions, went at 68. Not a lot of metres gained again from Hugh. That's probably the knock, but he is really in and under, and I felt like it was his best game for a while.
Most of the ball he obtains is under a lot of pressure, and he's using his body to crash in and get the ball and just jam it on the boot. So yeah, you're not going to be too accurate like doing it like that, but at least he is getting it and trying to get it moving in the right direction towards our goal. And you would never accuse this guy of not trying.
No, he's always trying to be creative.
Yeah.
And that's what we've always liked about him. The knock on him is that he doesn't have the pace, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And other teams have figured that out and are trying to exploit that.
Yeah, but I reckon used correctly in a well-balanced midfield, he's a weapon. And I would, I'm the same as you, Nick. I'd love to see him work on his burst speed during the off-season and just see if he can get a little bit of breakaway speed to give himself some time to dispose and deliver the ball more effectively and dangerously. But if we put the right midfield around Hugh Greenwood and Matt Crouch, then I think he's got a definite role to play. And 22 touches is a good return for Hugh. Look, of the rest, I won't go through everyone, but I'll pick and choose a couple here. We've talked about Lynchy. I thought Daniel Talia... Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
I thought Daniel Talia, despite having some foot issues earlier on, he just showed how important he is for us. He's really, I reckon his game's just returned to somewhere near his best form over the last few weeks, and I felt like he was a bit of a standout again. 8 marks across halfback to go along with 18 disposals, and he went at 78% disposal efficiency and 10 intercept possessions. So between him and Dede, 22 intercept possessions across that halfback line. I thought he was really good, Daniel Talia.
Yeah, excellent game. And if all the players played with the same absolute determination that Talia does, you wouldn't get beaten too often, because he hates being beaten. You can tell it. He just really hates it. And
Dude's the same.
Yeah, and look, players that play like that, they will always play well and consistently. And Talia, I still think that he is probably the best backman in the competition. He's not as leery as the Richmond guy who thinks he's Hollywood. But
Rance got shut down again. He struggles when he's got a man up. Rance only had 15 touches and only took 3 marks for the night.
And they even tried to play him on Fogarty at times.
Again, exactly the same as last time. They tried to free him up. And
it still didn't work, because Fog was actually better at that.
Yeah. So, I felt like Fogarty ran to good positions to get Rance out of the equation. And when Rance had to go one-on-one, he wasn't up to it. So Talia for mine is a ton better.
But he is so overrated, Rance. I reckon if he passed wind, they'd say that was fantastic.
But he would look so pretty whilst doing so, Macca.
Look, yeah.
For me, that start of the game, where we actually control the play, and we could have had 4 fucking goals. And Talia was just immense. And then I saw the injury, and I'm like, no, just please don't. And when he came back on, and they're all like, I don't think he'll come back on. He doesn't look, he doesn't look great, doesn't look right. It's like, he never looks right. But the way he still managed to play out that game and was still so effective, I actually think our defence did really well in spite of us losing by 57 points.
Well, I agree with you, Nikki. I felt like and I think Don Pike mentioned it in his presser that, our defence was under siege for a lot of that game, 62 inside 50s to...
Yeah.
Whatever we had, 67 to 45. So I thought, and even Kyle Hardigan, who obviously had some forgettable disposal issues, I felt like Kyle did his primary job well.
He played well on Rewalt.
Yeah, I don't think Revolt had a huge impact on the game, and Revolt got most of his possessions high up the ground. So I don't think our defence was actually the problem. As I mentioned at the beginning, I feel like it was our midfield. And it wasn't because of Sam Jacobs either, who I felt continued to play reasonably well, although probably wasn't quite as involved in the run of play as what he was against West Coast. So I reckon Nankervis is a tricky opponent, but
he's a very competitive beat.
Yes, very much like the bloke he replaced, Maric, I reckon, a similar player. But Sauce had 11 touches, took 5 marks, 42 hit-outs, of course. So from that perspective, he did really well. And
when they started getting a little bit on top of the midfield was when they were actually reading his taps. And he was, once again, like we saw last week, he was tapping to different places.
Yes.
Richmond had to actually rove to him.
It's a noticeable change, isn't it, over the last couple of weeks? That he is mixing up his ruck work a bit more.
His back, he can actually twist.
Mm. Yeah, which begs the question, why didn't they bloody rest him when we had a couple of alternatives sitting in the twos? Anyway,
because they were injured too.
No, before that, Riley O'Brien wasn't injured when Sauce did his back. I felt like Richmond played Paul's...
He was, actually.
Riley O'Brien? In round...
Yes.
Sauce did his back in...
He was being played when he wasn't quite right.
With his shoulder. We probably had Paul Hunter, could have had a crack. Anyway, whatever.
He did his ankle early on.
I felt like Richmond played Seedsman really well. I felt like they drew him away from the play as much as they possibly could. But the other thing and it might have just been my perception, but Seed to me played like a frustrated person. Did either of you guys think that?
I didn't pick that up, but you're right about dragging him out the play. And they certainly tried to do that. But
yeah, they didn't quite get it in the first quarter, but after that, they managed to drag him and keep him out a bit more. He still had cameos.
Yeah, but he wasn't.
But he needs to get a little bit smarter about that. This is what teams are going to try and do to him.
Yeah, well, and it would be new to him. Teams actually recognising him as a key component of our transition, our ball movement, and they're starting to put work into him, which is probably a first for him. But he only had the 8 kicks, unfortunately, for 18 touches, took 4 marks. Went at 83% disposal efficiency and still got 429 metres gained, so not terrible. And certainly not as terrible as the next guy, Richard Douglas, who... I just shake my head. Nothing about Richard's game at the moment. Yeah. And for a large parts of this year, we could probably say that Richard Douglas tried, but I don't think at any stage... I've felt as if he's been the player that he should be as the most senior player in the team, and to only have 17 touches, 12 and 5, go to 65% disposal efficiency, only 8 contested possessions, and it's like twice he was second to the ball and then gave away frees. It was a dirty night for Richie, and I don't know whether his midfield days are numbered, actually. He seems like he's too sluggish.
Well, Mrs. Macker and you would have a great fight for the I Hate Richard Douglas club, but she keeps saying the same things you say.
She's a very good judge.
She's not a fan of him at all, and she wouldn't even have him in the team. And I think probably there is nobody to replace him at the moment, but that day may well come.
Yeah, well, I was terribly...
Whilst he didn't have a good game, and you're right with a whole lot of those things, for me, he was one of those few forwards we actually had who was trying to do actual run, though. And that's my problem.
In his primary...
He was actually trying to do it.
In his primary role, Nicky, as a midfielder, he didn't run. He didn't make space. He wasn't at the contest. He falls over. Sorry, not a fan. I'm also not a fan of playing Jake Kelly on the wing. I just
he was buggered, the poor bugger.
Yeah, but I just don't think he's got the tools to be a wingman, does he?
No, he's not a wingman.
No, I think if we're playing him on the wing, we play him on the wing in a defensive role, which is why I wanted Wilson to come in. Because you could put Wilson on the wing, which sends Jake Kelly back, and use him on short bursts on the wing to relieve, or if we get an injury. I wanted Wilson in that team.
I don't think Wilson would have been the answer. Just another slow wingman.
Yeah, he wouldn't have added much, Nicky.
Lockie Murphy was the one. I don't understand why we didn't.
I do agree with that. Yeah, that's the one that should have been in.
I actually think Lockie Murphy's been stiff this year.
We're playing Gallucci and Paholke too high, but also the problem is with both of those is they're midfielders. And you could see it at one point where we had a high ball come in and we actually had a nice contest going on. Tex brought the ball forward because he couldn't mark it, but he brought it forward to that front and square. Paholke was standing off to the side. He'd run in, but he'd run in to be to the side of the contest instead of coming through that front and square. And that's more a midfielder than a forward.
Or a true small forward rather than a...
And that's what you would see Murphy do.
Yeah, exactly right. It's Eddie Betts front and square every time, and Lockie would be the same. And, I think it's good that we've got games into Jordan and Paholke, although Paholke I think looks a bit cooked, to be honest. But I'm not as... he got ripped up on the big footy boards. I think he's got a future, but I think he's been asked to play far too many minutes this year. Probably through lack of alternatives, but also being played out of position. And it's unfortunate that we've got a few blokes in his role at the moment as an inside sort of mid.
And so by the look of it. By the look of it, in the SNFL, Riley Knight had quite a decent game. So it'd be interesting if he comes in. He tends to play well against Geelong.
Knight has to come in for Hampton, surely.
Oh, easily.
So, I don't know. I think Knight could have had played a quarter on one leg and got picked over Hampton.
Easily.
Quickly to finish off, Jenkins, as I mentioned earlier, I felt like everyone knows that I'm not a fan of Josh Jenkins, but I feel like he's really making himself valuable in terms of a trade prospect to the Gold Coast Suns because he's very competitive. His ruck work has improved, and you can't knock his effort, and he has been playing with blokes hanging off him, and I think that it's really good to have Josh in this vein of form, because if we can get a high second or even a low first for him at season's end over to the Suns, that'll help us get into the South Australian lads in the first round of the draft this year.
Now you keep saying
they might be after two brothers, though. That's what the talk is.
Who's that?
The Victoria brothers, the Suns.
Which brothers?
From the under-18s comp. Well, one didn't play. Is it King or something like that?
Oh, you're talking about the twins?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were talking about draft, trading.
But, no, I just want to query Feed about this. You've said this about 5 or 6 times now about Jenkins and the Suns. Is there any interest ever been shown by them in Jenkins?
I'll tell you what, I'm interested.
Yeah, no, he's interested.
I'm interested
because JJ's actually playing well.
I know you're interested, but is Jenkins interested in going, and is the Gold Coast interested in having him? It's so good.
Jenkins would have gone to the Brisbane Lions for $750. Look at the situation that the Suns are in with their forward lines. They don't have a consistently good tall forward, and I think Jenkins would fit into their structure quite well. And I think we should make the Moneyball decision, and particularly with the way the draft looks for us this year, with those 4 lads in probably all going in the first round. I think we can. I'm sure we'll discuss this more on Tuesday night. But in my view, I think the squad is cooked. I think that there's nothing more that this squad can achieve. I think that's probably the reason why Sloaney has put off signing, because I think he wanted to see if there was any more bark in the dog at Adelaide, and I think he's come to the conclusion that no, there isn't, rightly so. And I think as a consequence of that, it would be absolutely irresponsible of the club not to do everything possible to situate ourselves appropriately to have the best possible chance of getting Lukosius and Rankin at the very, very least, and perhaps one of Rosie and the other guy.
Hately would be the one I'd really like to look.
Yeah.
Watching Hately in that game, he's a good player.
Yeah, but Rankin and Lukosius are once-in-generation players, and for them to be South Australian means that they're not flight risk. And we've got at the moment. What have we got at the moment? We've got 2 or 3 first rounders. We've got 2 at the moment, haven't we?
2 and a possible, and then the end of the first and the second round.
Yeah. So 2 for Sloane, 1 for Jenkins, and if McGovern decides to bugger off, then probably another, at least 1 for him. All of a sudden, we've got 6 or 7 first round draft picks, and if we can't turn that into Lukosius and Rankin, there's something freaking wrong. And I just think our club needs to be realistic about where this squad is, and this squad is done.
The problem is, though, Phoenix, is there's also live trading of picks that come into play.
Yep, but that's
this year, because there's that bit of stupidity as well.
Yep, but if we position ourselves correctly, we should be able to take advantage of that situation, Nikki. Because
I do think that probably one of the best predictors of the draft is actually Hamish.
Yeah, well, there's no need to predict. There really is no need to predict. Lukosius will go 1 or 2. Rankin will go in the top 3. We just need to make sure that those 2 boys end up in Adelaide Crow's colours. Nothing else matters. And in our current position, the only thing that will stop that from happening is if the club pig-headedly try to play out the season as hard as possible and get an honourable 9th or 10th, and then are too conservative at the trade table to not push on blokes like Rory, who, I'm with you, Macca, thanks for your service. Go and see if you can jag something with Hawthorn in the twilight of your career. And JJ, who has had a very good season, but is not a shadow of what young Lukosius is going to be as a key forward.
Well, I don't think you won't get 2 first rounders for Rory, but
yes, you will.
Well, if you have a look, Hawthorn, they're going to finish higher than us at the end of the year, so their pick is going to be out. Several.
He's a restricted free agent, so we can match anything.
I understand that, but if we allow him to go we would then get the next pick after us. He'd be worth a first rounder. So I'm with you, like, in the sense that we should be. Well, I'm not going to say tanking, but not necessarily trying to finish too high up, so that we can get 2 pretty good picks that would easily then be able to convert into like a 1 or a 2.
Well, our first round pick is probably going to be 5 or 6, and then if Rory goes, that'll be 6 or 7, and then on top of that, we've got Melbourne's first rounder, which was probably going to be about 10 or 12 maybe, and then
more likely about 12, I'd say.
Yeah, 12, and then if we got rid of Jenkins, I'm sure we could get a first rounder for Jenkins. So that would give us 5. 1, 2.
I'm not
3,
sure
4,
whether you
5.
would get a first rounder for Jenkins because
I think you would.
No, because
$60 a year key forward.
Yeah, but you probably have to throw in something else because they wouldn't want us to have 3 first round draft picks.
Oh, I'm happy to throw in something else. Rory Atkins. But look, I think I think we've got some currency, and I think that it would be bereft of the club to ignore that. And if we go vanilla on this situation, where we've got an opportunity to reset our squad for the next 10 years with some absolute dead set quality, we've got good juniors. We've got lads like Darcy. We've got Jordan Gallucci. We've got we've got
Ben Davis and Himmelberg.
Yeah, Elliot Himmelberg is a bit of a forgotten man at the moment, and Ben Davis is sort of pushing claims as well. We've got good young lads. What we lack is quality in the 24 to 28 age group, and that's all comes back down to the Tippett sanctions and us being out of the draft for that period of time. And we ended up with blokes like Atkins, who was a good speculative pick, but in the end just isn't going to pan out. And I just feel like we need to take advantage of this situation, because it's not going to happen again.
The only problem is the place where we really have an issue is our midfield, and it's speed in our midfield, and that's not Lukosius and Rankin.
Oh, I don't know. Rankin
might be able to.
Rankin's a quick midfielder. Don't worry about that.
He's tiny.
I think
he's small, though.
Rankin is a must. Just watching the guy play, he is an absolute must.
Oh, completely. He's the next Eddie.
No, Nicky, he's not Eddie. He is he's a genuine bona fide midfielder.
How tall is he?
183, I think.
Yeah, he's believe it or not.
So he's a bit taller than what I thought. He's just, I've seen him in the SNFL and he looks small.
No,
but
that could be just the way he plays.
Well, those who say he's the next Andrew McLeod.
Yeah, he is a dead set midfielder.
Completely. I agree with you guys that he's a star, but I wasn't too sure about what his tank, etc., would be like for a midfield, or would he be like Wingard?
Well, no,
that you look at him and you think you could do it, but we know Wingard's lazy.
He played in the under-18 competition as a midfielder and messing him up forward. And admittedly, he spent a fair bit of time up forward, but he was in the middle several times.
Yeah, he's a midfielder.
Because I didn't see those games, so
yeah.
You should have watched the last one against Victoria. I did recommend that to people, and I tell you what, you wouldn't have been disappointed, because the guys that we are interested in, they all stood out like bloody dog's balls.
Yep.
They did.
Yep.
And
can we tell Smithers off for coaching them too well?
Well, yeah, they made that a little bit harder for us to get them, and even like Haitley, I thought very impressive.
Yeah.
Is it Valenti who's the captain? The
Sorry?
Norwood boy? Who's the Norwood boys who was the captain?
Is it Valenti or something?
I think it's Valenti, yeah.
Yeah, because I saw a couple of things that he did. They were really nice.
Yeah, that wasn't necessarily his best game of the competition, and he's a good player. But if I had, you said I could have three, there's no doubt to be Lukosius and Rankin, and you don't have to be Einstein to get that one. I reckon even you'd get that one right, Nicky. And
you're so lucky you're not
left-right combo going on here.
And
that's only because I've been proven right a couple of times tonight. He can't handle it.
And Haitley would be the third one.
Yeah. Look, and this is my point. Rarely have we seen such quality stock come out of South Australia, and it just happens to coincide with a down year for us. And I'm not saying tank, but I'm saying we've got an opportunity to give Tex a rest and give Davis a run, or give Lynchy a rest and give Davis a run, or Elliot Himmelberg, give him a run. We've got to start being proactive and realistic about our list management and our squad. And if we just continue to plough along like we are, the season is done. We are not going to win a flag. We're not going to make the 8. So let us be proactive and take some of these young South Australian guns, because in terms of losing players like Dangerfield, you're not going to lose an Isaac Rankin. You're not going to lose a Lukosius. You're not going to lose a Haitley, because they're South Australian lads. So I'll be seriously disappointed if we don't take advantage of this draft crop. It's a gilt edge opportunity for us.
I think it is probably the once in a generation opportunity for us to do it, but probably have to make a lot of sacrifices to do it. You would do it. I would do it. But will the club do it?
Well, and that's the $64 million question, Macca. And, do you know, I hate ragging the club, but it's gotten to the point with me that if they don't go hard and aggressive at this draft, then to me it will indicate that they are more interested in being perpetually competitive than winning premierships. That's my view.
Well, yeah, we're not going to win a flag this year, and it's really, really doubtful even if we went flat out that we can make the finals. And yet, if we don't go flat out and win 2 or 3 more games, and get ourselves in a position, all we're likely to do is move ourselves 2 or 3 positions up in the in the order, and make it harder for us to get these.
So what's the point?
Well, really, I would think that if the club had any sense at all, the board would get together with the coaches and the assistant coaches, etc., and plan the rest of the year where we're going to and what we should be doing to get, as you say, to optimise our position in the draft.
Time will tell, and I think it'll be very indicative of the attitude of the club overall. And unfortunately, my gut feel is that we place more importance on being perpetually competitive than we do on actually being proactive about winning premierships. And I guess I'd love to be wrong, and I guess the next 6 to 8 weeks, or probably 12 weeks if you include the draft and trade period, will be we'll see the truth of that come out. Not only that, but the way we handle our fitness department.
If we do anything like that, if you actually had the board meeting with that, the AFL would find out about it and we would get done for tanking.
No, not at all. Not at all.
The AFL would do us for tanking.
No, Nikki,
they'd not do anybody else, but they would do us.
Nikki, you know what? That's not a reason not to manage your list. We can justify not playing Lynch. He's had bloody viral meningitis, chronic fatigue, glandular fever, concussion issues. Give him 4 weeks off and play Ben Davis. Tex has had his foot. He's not fit. He's too heavy. He's out of form. Get games into Elliot Himmelberg.
Himmelberg you'd swap for Jenkins.
Well, either way, there are plenty of opportunities to give these young lads games.
I don't have a problem with that.
It's not tanking in doing so.
We know it's not, but if we try to do anything like Macca was suggesting about having a meeting, etc., the AFL would freaking hear about it and we would get done because they would do that to us. They would finally find a club guilty of tanking and it would be us.
No, I'd do it anyway.
It'd be more along the lines, Nikki, of that, No,
it doesn't matter what the lines would be. I know how the AFL would see it, and they would do us for it.
Well, thank you for letting me put my argument up there, Nikki. But, I was wrong before without saying anything then. So it doesn't matter, Nikki. Look, Fiend and I, we're sure there's ways you could do it.
Yep. Let's wind that up because that's really a conversation for Tuesday night, and I'm sure that we will continue that conversation. Let's just quickly do our awards and get into the Cockwomble. So, does anyone not... Oh, come on. What's going on here? Here we go. Jet of the Week. Does anyone think that it wasn't Matty Crouch?
No, Matty Crouch.
Yeah. Honourable mentions to Tales and Duday.
What do you reckon, Matt?
Sorry, for the best player?
Yep.
Yeah, no, Matty Crouch definitely in for me,
yep.
And I'd probably have Duday in second spot.
Yeah, I'm with Nick. I reckon Matty Crouch with honourables to Tommy Duday and Daniel Talia. I thought both those played well. And also Josh Jenkins, despite low numbers, I felt like his energy and application were there, and he
created an impact.
Yep, certainly gave the All-Australian centre-half back a touch-up.
Good effort game, yeah.
Yep. Breakout award, definitely, I would imagine, is a bit of a lay-down.
Yep.
Tommy Duday.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
We can spend a while on this one.
I actually think I'm going to rename this award the Perpetual Curtly Hampton Wake Up Award, or the Memorial Curtly Hampton Wake Up Award. Memorial simply because we'll be remembering the career that he just absolutely finished on. Look, the only thing I could possibly think of is that he was injured, but even so, his numbers were horrific. And
I reckon, you raised a point there. I honestly think he played with injury and tried to cover it up and never told them. But I watched.
They can't do that. They get found out, Macca.
Well, they got found out, right? Because I was watching him try to chase, and look, he's normally got a reasonable amount of speed. And I reckon an elephant would have beat him. He was running that slowly.
Well, the thing, when he was chasing that ball back, he was actually beating that. I forget the other guy's name. Was it Grick? He was beating that other guy for pace. But as soon as that guy made contact with him, he just gave up.
That's what he doesn't like.
Just gave up. And not only that.
That's what I've been telling you.
Yeah, all right. But not only that, I've never seen Hampton do that, Nick. Like, come on, that's an extreme situation. And not only that, he gave up the chase for the ball, but then he didn't even chase on the way out either. It was horrific. And I don't know how he was able to stay on the ground after that. Why didn't Pike just make an example and go, Curtly, you're out of there? Because that was... if I saw that as a coach, I'd be thinking this bloke doesn't want to be there.
I would have taken him off and played short for the rest of the game.
Yeah. So the Curtly Hampton AFL Career Memorial Wake Up Award goes to Curtly Hampton.
Yep.
And probably a candidate for the next one as well.
I actually need some help on this because I didn't watch a lot of football over the weekend, unfortunately.
Well, my nomination goes to Nikki for not actually preparing for the only thing. One job, Nikki. One
I have a nomination here which I found hilarious, which is all the Port supporters who got very upset about the song the SA team sang.
What was that?
After they won. Well, they sing "With the Pride of South Australia" with a mighty SA team.
Do they really?
Yep.
Yeah, they did.
They do. I don't know when that started, but that's the South Australian song, and oh my God, with the hissy fits galore.
Oh, I don't know how I feel about that. I wonder what they used to sing back in the day in the State of Origin games.
Did they ever actually sing anything?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
No, but I think PJ's probably got it right. The AFL should get it, but for that bloody rule about what's it called? Where you're not allowed to go within 10 metres.
Anti-density. Oh, the protected area rule.
The protected area rule.
Did they change it, or did they just say you have to enforce it this way? It's their interpretation they changed.
No, there were varying interpretations over the weekend. There were some that wouldn't pay it virtually at all. And I saw some
cough, Dusty, cough.
I saw some poor little prick go when the bloke's actually taken the mark, and he happened to be standing near him when he took the mark, and went immediately for being in the protected area. I
think the AFL gets a second one too for this ridiculous confusion that's around the 30-second shot clock. Because now, even though a bloke's got 30 seconds to take his shot, the umpires are calling them to hurry up and play on if it's deemed that they're deliberately wasting time. Now, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're going to give a bloke 30 seconds to have a shot for goal, sorry guys, you give him 30 seconds. You can't, you've got umpires
you can do what he damn well likes with it.
You've got umpires calling play on 15 seconds into a 30-second shot clock. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, but the package blew that the week before, didn't
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter if he blew it.
Yeah, but he stood in the goal square, grinning like an idiot, thinking this was great. But
that's the rule, Mecca.
But I told you at the time it looked very bad for the game, and I knew that was going to bring a rebound.
Yeah, so what you do is you don't have the umpire calling play on when the bloke's got the shot clock. Because if I was the bloke that got called play on while I'm 15 seconds into a shot clock, I would have put the ball under my arm and pointed at the scoreboard at the 30-second clock. Because what's a bloke supposed to do, and how is an umpire supposed to make yet another interpretation about whether the guy's wasting time or not? I know Stringer made it obvious, but there's been a couple of examples this weekend where it hasn't been obvious, and the umpire is now calling play on while the guy is trying to take a kick for goal.
Well, what actually happens is this: is that there are rules originally. Then we get interpretations coming into it, and the umpires don't have they have no feel, they have no football intelligence whatsoever with the decisions that they make when they've given these interpretations.
It's not so much them, Macca. No, it's because what you've got is you've got different coaches in different states. So they're being told one thing from the headquarters, but how well are they actually saying what that interpretation should be? It's ridiculous. The interpretations have always been a problem because they've always been different across all the umpires. I just remember when the rules used to be so much clearer and you didn't have the interpretations. There's so many grey areas like they do now.
Yeah, but they're bringing all these stupid bloody rules in, and
yeah, but that's Niki's point.
Yeah, and the very point of the fact they bring these in, and you've got these guys that that don't seem to have a feel for what footy's about, and you get all the various interpretations of the same interpretation.
Yeah, but do you know what, Macca? I've always been of a similar mind to you, that there's just umpires around that are just generally either biased or no good. But I'm starting to lean more heavily towards the AFL trying to manipulate the look and feel of the game by instructing umpires to do certain things. And, the case in point is this wasting time situation. Another case in point is the proposed anti-density laws that they're looking at trialling in the JLT. If they just allowed the umpires to actually officiate the game, like if an umpire was allowed to pay holding the ball, pay high tackle, pay in the back in a stoppage situation, pay incorrect disposal, and all the rest of it, you wouldn't have the congestion that everyone's up in arms about at the moment. But instead, I am sure that the AFL House tell the umpiring department, we want a game that flows, so don't pay a free kick unless it's really, 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 really there, which actually is counterintuitive and has the opposite effect to what they're intending. If they actually paid frees, the game would flow far quicker, and the umpires would be able to umpire a lot easier. Yeah, exactly.
Watch how the SANFL umpire, because you know who actually coaches the SANFL umpires? Ex-umpires. Not what the AFL does, which is put in fucking ex-players who
just
had
put in yes men.
No idea.
But they just put in yes men, Nikki.
Oh, precisely.
But you are right, though, Phoenix. And the point is, if they paid the free kicks, it would stop the rolling ball.
Exactly right, Macca. That's my point. Pay the first free. Everyone
and stop allowing players to just drop the ball out of a tackle. Nick. Pay a free against them for that, because dropping that ball then creates a congestion.
Yep.
It's just like I'm watching it going, this is exactly how it's going to happen.
Yep.
Because I have an umpiring background. I know what's going to come next.
Yep.
And I know what they're doing wrong.
The longer the play goes in close, the more people that are going to gather around the ball. So you pay the first free that's there, obviously, but you pay the first free. Immediately the players are running to the next contest or running to wherever they're demanded to run with a game plan or whatever. The only thing that I would consider bringing in to try and assist against congestion is I would trial allowing anyone of the team to take the free kick, because I think it's a bit antiquated now to have that the guy that gets tackled high or whatever is the guy that has to take the free kick. I'd like to be able to see anyone of that particular team be able to take the free kick as long as he's over the mark, and that would speed up the game further. But aside from that, just pay the freaking frees.
Yes.
Yes, there is a actually rule book we're not talking about interpretations now. There is a rule book, and if they just stuck to that rule book, as you said, we'd have a very simple game.
The thing is on that though, Macca, I remember the rule book I had, and what is now put out as the rules of the game is a lot shorter than what I used to have to deal with. And in fact, most of the bulk that is taken up in the rules of the game are to do with the size of the playing field and reports, not to do with the actual what should be interpretations or everything else. There's a whole lot on how to grade a hit or whatever. It's like, can you actually tell us what a throw should be?
I was actually amazed,
and all those other stuff.
Yeah, I was amazed when I can't remember why I went to look at the AFL rules, but I did a few months ago. And you're exactly right, Nikki. 90% of the rules are administrative or not related to the definition of holding the ball or prior opportunity or dropping the ball or what's the throw or blah, blah, blah. So it's clear that what I said earlier is the case, that the AFL used the umpiring department to manipulate the look and feel of the game. And it's an absolutely ridiculous set of circumstances, and it's no wonder that as a spectator, no one knows what the hell is going on half the time. And I'm sure the umpires would be frustrated as well.
In the Essendon Collingwood game, I think it was, an umpire paid a 50-metre penalty for a deliberate free. Is there such a thing?
A deliberate free?
Yeah, and they were talking about it on the TV.
Oh, no, it's if you do hold the ball, if you're deliberately keeping a player out of the play after a free has been paid and then you're bringing them down, that's actually, that should have been paid, should be paid so many other times when it's done. I would actually prefer it's the SANFL interpretation, so it only becomes a 25. That's something I think the AFL should bring in, is actually the 25 penalty for things like this. And that's why you have a lot more free-flowing game in the SANFL, because if you give that little shove after a player's taken a mark, which is what they're supposed to do. So if you've paid a free and they then infringe again, yes, that's when you should be paying to stop that. And
I've never seen it paid before, Nikki.
Yeah, I do know the one you were talking about, because I think that was when I was flicking over from the V8s. That has been in the rules. It's just rarely paid, and I think it should be paid a lot more than what it does. So because if you're deliberately holding up play, Hawthorn were very good at it, because they just hang on to the play whilst they look at the umpire, go, no, is it him? Oh, what's it for? I'm still hanging on to it. Oh, I'll let go now.
Yeah.
And
very good. Geelong used to do it as well.
Yes. And it should be paid. So it is actually a rule backer, but I'm not sure whether it's actually in the rule book anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's Simon Moore said, was holding after disposal, restricting the player from running on, and I think that's what it was paid for.
Yeah.
But I've never seen
deliberately holding on play.
I've never seen it paid before.
I got a call time. This is a very good conversation, but it's a Tuesday night conversation. We've been going for nearly an hour and a half, guys, so we should probably
let's give it to the AFL.
Let's give it to the AFL.
And their stupidity regarding it and their umpiring.
Yeah, they deserve it.
Very good. All right, thanks everyone in the chat for joining us tonight. Thanks to everyone that listens. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at AFL CrowCast. Visit aflcrowcast.com, and we'll see you on Tuesday night for Tuesday Night Live. See you guys.
Yeah, good night all.
Night all.